Hello, my name is Chana Cox. I am one of Nana Khana's grandchildren. My grandmother was a great teacher to me and my siblings and my cousins in many different ways. First of all, she taught me how to make rice pudding and angel food cake. She taught my cousins a lot of history of about different diseases. She gave me beautiful floral hat that I now love and I will cherish it forever. I love her and I will miss her. She was a wonderful grandmother. A song of essence. I will lift up mine eyes unto the mountains from what shall help come. My help cometh from the Lord who made heaven and earth. He will not suffer thy foot to be moved. Thee will not slumber. Behold, he that kept Israel doth neither slumber nor sleep. The Lord is thy kept, and thy Lord is thy shade upon thy right hand. The sun shall not smite thee by day, nor by moon by night. The Lord shall keep thee for all evil. He shall keep thy soul. The Lord shall guard thy going out and thy coming in, from this time forth and forever.
I was very close to my grandmother. She was in many ways a mother to me. And when I heard she got diagnosed, I flew out to Oregon and spent 3 weeks in a hospital with her. And this was the book that she just never ever let go of. She would go into tests with it. She would go to sleep with it. When she couldn't sleep, I would hear her up at night praying for her family. And then when she got too ill and she couldn't read it herself, I read it to her. And so I'm going to read Psalm 27 out of this book. The Lord is my light and my salvation. Whom shall I fear? The Lord is the strength of my life. Of whom shall I be afraid? When the wicked, even mine enemies and my foes, came upon me to eat up my flesh, they stumbled and fell. Though a host shall encamp against me, my heart shall not fear. Though war should rise against me, in this I will be confident. One thing I have desired of the Lord, that I will seek after, that I may dwell in the house of the Lord all the days of my life, to behold the beauty of the Lord, and to acquire his temple. From his time of trouble he shall hide me in his pavilion, in the secret of his tabernacle shall he hide me. He shall set me upon a rock. And now shall mine head be lifted up above my enemies round about me. Therefore I will offer his tabernacle sacrifices of joy. I will sing praises unto the Lord. Hear, O Lord, when I cry with my voice. Have mercy upon me and answer me. When thou said, seek ye my face, my heart said unto thee, thy face, Lord, will I seek. Hide not thy face far from me. Put thy servant away in anger. Thou hast been my help. Leave me not. Neither forsake me, O God of my salvation. When my father and mother forsake me, then the Lord will take me up. Teach me thy way, O Lord, and lead me in a plain path because of mine enemies. Deliver me not over unto the will of my enemies, for false witnesses are risen up against me, and such as breathe out cruelty. I had fainted, unless I had believed to see the goodness of the Lord in the land of the living. Wait on the Lord, be of good courage, and he shall strengthen thy heart. Wait, I say, unto the Lord. I love my grandmother very much, and I'm happy she's in a better place. And thank you, everybody, for being here.
Next is Psalm 23. Mizmor David, Adonai Roi lo achzar. Minotesha yavitzeni, al mei menuchat yamleni. Nafshi yeshovev yanchin b'maglei tzedek, leman shemo. Gam ki elech b'ketzal mavet, lo yira ra. Ki ata imadi, shivtecha u'mishantecha, ema yenachamuni. La'aroch lefanai shulchan neged tzaveirai, yishanta v'shemen roshi kosi revaya. Ach tov v'chesed yudefuni kol yemei chayai, v'shavti b'beit Adonai la'orech yamim.
A Psalm of David. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He maketh me to lie down in green pastures. He leadeth me beside the still waters. He restoreth my soul. He leadeth me in straight paths for his name's sake. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me. Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. Thou preparest a table before me in the presence of mine enemies. Thou hast anointed my head with oil, my cup runneth over. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of the Lord forever.
I'm going to do Asia's Kyle in English first, Isaiah and I. Will
In Hebrew first.
In Hebrew first, sorry, and then my father will say it in his traditional manner.
Which is nobody else's traditional manner.
Eishes Chaim Meim Sa V'Rachok Mitnimin Micha Batach Bale Bala V'Shala Lo Yesar G'masu Tov V'Lo Ira Kol Yemei Rayeh Darsha Tzemer V'Ishtim Das Hebetz Kabeha I Zagani I Sochem Mimerak Sami Lachmo Batagam Be'alayla V'Niger Le'Veisach Chogin Araseh Zamamasa B'Den Eho Nibricha Be'anadagarem Agrabeas V'Znea V'Dam Be'Soraseh Dama Kitov Sachra Lo Yichbe Balayla Neira Yadei Ashir Lecha V'Kishor V'Ravea Tofalev Kama Pasal Yani V'Yadei Ashir Lecha Le'er V'Zir Alei Samishaleg Kechov Zalav Hushanim V'Avani Maseh Salva Sheish Rageman Nebusha Nada V'Shavim Bala V'Shivto Im Zignei Aretz Sadinas Tabatim Kor V'Chagon Nazna Ganani Odara Levusha V'Disol Hayom Acharon Pia Patzcha V'Chachma V'Tzor Mas Chesed Aleshon Natzvi Alecha Etzpetza V'Lechem Matzlochel Kamen Yeshua Bala V'Ayeh Allah Ravos Pazu Chayil V'Yazalihi Sakol Ahono Sheker
This translation you like.
Oh, what's the translation you like?
It is.
I like the translation I like. I was going to say about two things about it. In the
Yeah, whatever you want. This is what you do.
Yes.
in the old days, in the battles, with very small players in the oil fields, I always I was so pleased to have showers come along. Save us from my wife. And forget about all the troubles and problems from the 32nd floor and the 28th floor of the International Hotel where we lived. So anyway, see if I can read it. Might be able to. A good wife who can find she's with far more than release. Has some trust in what she will. She would not harm all the days of her life, so all flies. Like a merchant ship, she brings food from afar and rises away at night He gives food to her household and rations to her maids. She gets to the field, she buys it with her earnings, she plants the vineyard, she girds herself with strength, embraces her armor for work. She finds her treatise proper lamp goes out at night, she sets out her hands, the distant her fingers hold the spindle. She stretches out her hands for the poor, she reaches out her arms to the needy, she's not afraid for snow for her household, for all her household is clad in the scarlet wool. She figures the tapestries, her clothing, linen, fine purple. That's known the gates, it sits among the lands, among the elders of the land, and makes linen cloth, and she sells it. She supplies the words of girdles, steaming garter and farm. She smells like the future. Showing the wisdom and kindness on her tongue. She looked after her household, she never eats the bread of idleness. Nor something bless her. Her husband praises her, saying, many women do brutally, God shall fall. Charm is deceptive, beauty is vain. May God my children be praised. Give her the credit for achievements, and her owners praise her against. And the one works. Mason, she stayed with me and ran the battles, and here we are. So,
Then I can speak about mom.
I can speak about mom.
They don't have a speech for me. You can speak whatever you want to speak.
Well, I guess the biggest thing is we should have never gotten married. It was totally not acceptable to anybody before we got married. I think that's fair. And you know, her father is, you know, has great yikus and from a great rabbinic family, and he married out by marrying the daughter of a poor Jewish shoemaker. You know, you know, amazing love story on that part, and they escaped and ran away and avoided the Holocaust, which is wonderful. But one couldn't want her wife and her partner. I mean, you know, we decided to go live in the woods, give up New York City, and the first thing effectively we had to do, it took several years to do it, but we hauled 1.3 million pounds of concrete, steel, and wood and other things to build our first house in the wilderness. And the only good part about it was, I guess, is the, like every other building inspector and the like, they say, you think you can build that? You know, go ahead and do it. And after we built it, you know, helicopters lived over us so that they knew we were master gangsters. It was really something they didn't understand. Hannah, just, it didn't bother her. I mean, she could actually walk. You know, I just stopped a couple of times, you know, with I guess her 94 pounds, 96 pounds, bags of concrete on her shoulder, and just walk with them. I mean, she was tough. So it was fantastic. It's been an incredible life. We have a fantastic family. The kids are wonderful. And the grandkids are marvelous. And we'll only want another 30 or 40 grandkids, and we'll take a couple of hundred grandkids.
He's looking your way.
Well, I hear there's a roof still. I have very small ambitions that way, okay? And I just couldn't have wished or wanted for a more spectacular, lovely life. And you know, it was, I'll just say one last little story. We got together because when I rented an apartment in New York by Columbia, she was behind me in the line. And I harassed the poor guy. I mean, he ended up signing a lease with me because he had a deadline to meet to get his funding from the mortgage company before he lost the building. So he signed a lease whereby I owned this building, et cetera, et cetera. It was really great. And Hannah was behind me. She said, I'll sign anything he signed. When Hannah went to break her lease, she came a call and to make sure that I could get her out of it because she was moving into a friend. Shortly thereafter, she moved in with me. So,
For context, he slept outside of her door until she agreed to that.
Yes.
well, you know, I don't think I slept more than 30 days. Okay, and really, I thank you all for coming, and I really appreciate it. And should her life and everything be a blessing to all of you, and she was certainly a blessing to me and family and all the kids. It's just, but she was full of life, full of gladness, and you know, her parents are runaways. And so they didn't burn up in ash, and nor does she. What a way to go. Thanks, guys. Thank you very much. And do come up to the house afterwards.
My mother, Chana Cox, passed away this Shabbat at dawn in her mountaintop home. I want to share a few things about her. It will, of course, only be a small slice of who she was. That's all we can do at this time. My mother was born in Detroit, Michigan, unless Eli disagrees, and grew up with Yiddish as a first language, only learning English when she was first sent to school. Her father was a secular communist factory owner. He was also confused. From a prestigious rabbinic family, while she described her mother as a Jewish peasant. Her mother was a prophet in her way, visited by the recently deceased, but a peasant nonetheless. In my grandfather's family, nothing was valued as highly as intelligence. Intelligence was better than goodness, was better than beauty, was better than community. Nothing mattered more. And as a firm denizen of the world of ideas, my mother's ultimate goal was to leave a legacy of ideas. She spoke about this in a play she wrote a couple of years ago, Academic Overtures. I just put it on Amazon. The legacy for her might be accompanied by her name, or it might simply work its way into the ideas of others, but would ripple out from her, changing the world she touched. Twice, I believe, my mother's family fled Detroit. The first time was during the MacArthur era, because they were communists. The second time was after the riots. After the riots, a newspaper boy was stabbed to death for asking a man to pay for a paper, and that was when they left for good, moving to Windsor, Ontario. In high school, my mother went on a speaking tour, and I suppose seeking to go far from Ontario, she enrolled in Reed College, not very far from here, and acquired an undergraduate degree in mathematics. Although my father was somewhat nearby at Willamette, they didn't meet until years later. They met when they were both working on their PhDs at Columbia University. I think you just heard that story, so I won't bother repeating it. But I will say that my mother has always liked a strong man, and it was hard among the New York academic population, especially Jews, to find anyone stronger than my dad. My mom taught at Columbia, but her path was not one of a simple, narrow career choice. She wouldn't specialize and then specialize some more. It wasn't the kind of person she was, certainly not after meeting my father. Her aspiration was to be a Renaissance woman. That required touching many different aspects of life. While still working on their PhDs, my parents moved to Idaho. They lived 10 hours from the nearest town for 8 years. Life there was extremely tough. As I've seen it, they were trying to build their own world. They were two contrarian people stepping back from a world that was changing at what seemed at the time like breakneck speed. They were building something slower and different in the backwoods. It was in Idaho, armed with the Shulchan Aruch and the Chumash, and that's it, that they became fruma. My father brought the passion, and my mother the intellect. The time in Idaho came to a close with the greatest tragedy in the story of my family, the death of my oldest brother, Jeremiah. He too was not far from here. I didn't know. I'm named after him. He was killed in an accident and they left the same day. And after leaving Idaho, my mother organized substantial explorations in the Canadian Arctic. And then during some particularly lean times, she left the business and went back to academia. She wasn't tenure track, she was already far too old for that. But she wasn't the kind of person you fired either. She was a senior lecturer with a tremendously varied background. And although she had her preferences, she taught in numerous fields and enriched the lives of those around her. She may not have been famous, but in her way, she had become the Renaissance woman she always wanted to be. She grew up a communist and became a capitalist. She lived in the wilderness, embracing many aspects of life in times long past. But then she worked in the modern world. She worked in business, but then she taught for decades, influencing countless students within the so-called ivory towers of Lewis and Clark College. She touched the ancient and the modern, the intellectual and the financial, the secular and the religious. And she learned from it all. And she taught based on it all. Her wisdom and writing are the reason why I am an author. Not surprisingly, much of my mother is reflected in her books and her plays, many of which are on Amazon, and you can see them at the back of the But the most important teaching she did wasn't in a university or in front of a class or through her books. The most important teaching she did involved the kids she and my father brought into their homes. My parents used their vision, their wisdom, to save children. Dozens of children. As my cousin Amitai told me, they saw hope in people that those people did not see in themselves. And they taught those children how to see what they saw. They made a new reality for them by the simple force of their will. They saved Amitai's life. And on Friday, Amitai told me he's using the same principle, the same to save the lives of others. One of his friends, an addict, suggested to Amitai that perhaps now that she's clean, she'd like to be a massage therapist. Amitai said, "You're pretty smart. I see you as a doctor." And now she's studying to be a doctor. Imagine the influence my parents' teaching, my mother's teaching, as a mother to kids who needed a mother, will have as it ripples through our world. As much as my mother was a woman of ideas, as much as my father dragged her into raising of troubled kids, perhaps her greatest legacy will be through her marriage to my father and the lives they changed together through a vision of hope and possibility that most of us can never comprehend. It was certainly a beautiful thing for us children to see. We were surrounded by such troubled children, and our parents understood that we would know what mistakes not to make because they were there. And we would learn the value of every human soul as they were, one after the other, redeemed from their own personal hells. My mother can no longer reach out to those children. She can no longer speak to us in person, but her ideas can still influence us. If you want to honor my mother, don't buy flowers. I know we've suggested a few big charities also in the back of the book. I'm sure she wouldn't mind if you gave to them. But if you really want to honor my mother, if you want to serve her deepest desires, buy or borrow one of her books, read it, and build what you learn into your own understanding of the world, and then share with others. In that way, she can be a Renaissance woman whose legacy is ideas that will continue to trickle and flow through the world she has left behind. And in that way, you can carry on her legacy, borrowing from wisdom hard-won to see hope in the lives of those around you. May God bless my mother and rejoin her with those who left her before she was ready to leave them. And may her potential continue to be realized through us, strengthening our world through the power of ideas and through the vision of possibility. Amen. Mitchell?
I'm not the intellectual of the family. It's far from intellectuals in the family. I'm going to give an emotional perspective on all of us. I did not learn to read till I was 10. I was, let's face it, not small. Some would call me obese, fat, large, whatever you want to call it. I was slow. I still have 2 left feet, and I'm massively learning disabled. I'm so learning disabled I actually qualify for supplemental Social Security. It's a funny thing in high school, and they say, yeah, you go to college, or by the way, there's $1,000 a month for you for the rest of your life. You just check out. When I flunked out of first grade, and boy did I flunk out of first grade, my mom took me home and said, throw it in the back cupboard. You can go hang out with some people. You'll be fine. Give it some time. You'll get over it. You'll learn. She stayed with me. And as a child, I didn't understand this period. I'll be very fair. I grew up into a house that was grieving. I never knew why they were grieving. I never knew why certain things were not normal. I never knew. I was a kid. But I grew up in a house that was grieving, with a mother that put up with me, with problems, with this, with that, with everything else. And fundamentally, it was not emotionally the easiest place, but it was the right place for me. I came out of it so much stronger. I came out of it learning. One of the things she said to me was, at some point, you'll outgrow this. At some point, you'll look back at this period and it won't matter. And it's funny because most people stop learning at some point. And I think about the fact that I've probably read or listened to 100, 150 books in the last year. Something stupid like that. It might have been 75. I don't know what the number is, but I do 2, 3, 4, 5 books a month on top of everything else I do. I'm still learning. I still can't read phonetically. I mean, the funny thing is I read 1,000 words a minute when I'm reading, and I can't read a single word phonetically. I can't even read Hebrew. I can't read anything phonetically because I have no phonetic skills. Everything is Chinese to me. But yet I can process it fairly quickly. I have no short-term memory. Yet my mom taught me how to build mind maps, which fundamentally employ me. I get paid because I can draw conclusions from mind maps that no one else in the world can draw. And people will put up with me working off a riverboat in Portland, Oregon, doing international finance. Who would have thought? I guess the Lord knows they don't want me in their office. When I was in college, she sent me between $350 and $350 a month. We lived next to the Mexican butcher in town, and they did butcher pigs outside, so it was quite high-grade rent. And $350 a month paid for my share of the room. And yes, I was shacked up with my future wife at that point, but you know we all have issues. Frankly, the best thing ever happened to me after my mom was probably her, but it's a side issue. So, what was my mom? My mom was an educator. First and foremost, she was an educator. Anyone she came across, anyone at all, she would teach them something. And if you read Pirkei Avot, you can see that someone who teaches someone one line of anything owns their soul. And the number of souls, and I know that's paraphrased wrong, but it's more or less what it says. The number of souls my mother owns, the number of random people she owns is just staggering. Because she educated. She was a thinker. She thought about things. Did I agree with all of it? No. But she thought about it all. She had an opinion. She had a view. She had no problem saying it. She was a cook. Oh my Lord, was she a cook. She taught me how to cut an apple properly, where you don't watch it. I do this with my daughters. They're terrified because they think I might cut myself. She taught me how to make meringues, how to split eggs. She taught me how to put on a Shabbat dinner for 30 people in 2 hours flat. And I can still do it. It's not the menu I do anymore, but I can still do it. She was a reader. When I applied to college, she had made me collect a list of books I'd read through the last 5 years. That was well over 1,000. For a kid who could not read at 10, to have read 1,000 books in high school, I got something from all of them. She was a worker. She worked. Every day she worked. Every day she did something. She would never sit still. I mean, she'd read a romance novel in 3 hours and get up and do something. She was always moving. And she showed me how to work ethic. Half of what I know how to buy a house, I learned from her. I can walk in her house in 30 seconds flat, know if I want to buy it and rehab it, and know exactly what I'm going to do to it. And half of what I learned about that, I learned from her. She could judge things, and she was always teaching. Now, was she perfect? Nope. Hate to say it. No one is. She never got past her grief. She lived her entire life grieving things that I could not understand. I have no empathy for her grief because I never experienced it. And to grow up in a house in grief without understanding why, you don't know. But even in that, she still got things done. She still accomplished things. What did I learn? What did she teach me? She taught me how to teach. The fact is, even when she was dying, I was running a course in Portland in a hotel room to a bunch of people about how to emotionally value sell mining equipment. I kid you not. How to give. How to care for people. I also learned that I needed tools that she didn't have. I learned I needed emotional tools. I learned I needed to learn how to do things that she couldn't do. So what do I say? I thank you, Mom. I thank you for everything you've done for me. Most importantly, I thank you for believing in me when literally No one else in the world would have. If you go around the world today, professionally, and say, hey, Benjamin, he's got learning disabilities, people would say, no, he's a jerk. They'd say all sorts of things about me. No one could believe that I have learning disabilities. I tell people, professionally, I have learning disabilities, they look at me and laugh. Because of my mother, I am someone. Over the last year, we've been doing a lot of talking. And in the last year, me and my mom have talked an awful lot. And I'm going to end with some of the words from her favorite song. A song that me and her have listened to many, many times. And makes this room cry. But one of the things that I learned from my mother is how much she got connection with people like Leonard Cohen. How much she got connection with the Montreal Jewish history. How much she got connection with all of that. And how much that meant to her. And me and her listened to Leonard Cohen a lot together, which drove the rest of the family crazy. And by the way, I'm going to pre-blow my nose because let's face it, at this point, if I don't listen to Leonard Cohen for at least a year, I'm going to be quite good. Leonard Cohen and Rabbi Sachs together thought about a lot of these things. And Leonard Cohen and Rabbi Sachs, my mom and me, all listened to things together and talked about it, and it was quite interesting. But I wanted to say one thing, and I want to say this with respect. Most people leave this world not on their terms. She was teaching until within a month of her cancer diagnosis. She was lying in her hospital bed, worrying about getting the final exams done for her final course. She was living on her terms, in her house. She had 24 grandkids on her terms. She had kids on her terms. She was worried about everyone in her world on her terms. She lived on her terms. And may we all be blessed. May we all be blessed to have our final terms be our terms. If you are the dealer, I'm out of the game. If you are the healer, it means I'm broken and lame. If thine is the glory, then mine must be the shame. You want it darker, we kill the flame. Magnified, sanctified be the holy name. Vilified, crucified in a human frame. A million candles burning for the help that never came. You want it darker. Hineni, I'm ready, my Lord.
As you may know, my family and I don't live nearby, and I need to start this hesped with words of gratitude, enormous, deep gratitude, because the burden of taking care of my mother has not been carried by me, and I am so grateful to those who have done it. I'm so grateful of Benjamin and Iris, who live here and who have gone on every wild goose chase imaginable, who've taken care of, spent ever was needed to love and support and aid my mother, and everybody else who has come to visit her and love her, and my siblings, Joseph, who spent as much time as he possibly could, and my sister, Nechama Katan, who in addition to being here so much, has made the hard decisions that nobody else wanted to make. That is really, really something, and it's a phenomenal appreciation. And to my brother-in-law, John Edelson, who came with his own medical problems, and he came and extended and loved and took care of my mother in every way he possibly could. He was an enormous sucker to her. It's really an amazing thing. As you've heard already, Chana Cox created her legacy. As she lived, she wrote. Above all, yes, I know she educated, but she wrote. Passionately, reflexively, with deep intellectual rigor. I have endless childhood memories, waking up from my bed, patting down to go say hello, good morning to my parents, finding my way to my mother's room. She would not be in bed. She would not be sleeping. She would be at her desk and typing at a speed that always impressed the heck out of me. She typed with rapidity and a controlled violence that even as a young kid I thought was a machine gun. And in some ways it was. She used her typewriter with devastating critiques. They were designed to demolish millennia of built-up intellectual fortifications. She typed with a single-mindedness that locked out the outside world. This is a woman who could create, just in her head, entire multiverses. She was so at home with ideas and the written word that they were like an addiction. My mother needed to create with words as much as most people need to eat or sleep. And you can see the brilliance leap out of the page. In fact, like the rest of my siblings, I encourage you to do so. Pick anything she has written and read it. It's the best way to honor her legacy. So a review of Chana Cox's life is in part, a small part, a book review. Here's mine. I still read the book on Plato, Reflections on the Logic of the Good, whenever I need some brain candy. A world-famous rabbi in London once said to me about Mom's devastating critique on Plato, "Did you understand her book? Because I couldn't. It was really hard." But he should have understood it because it actually is beautifully written. She took the most influential thinker of all time and she absolutely tears him apart till there is nothing left to do but to laugh or cry that so many people were deceived for so long. Plato's ideas led to most forms of totalitarianism, including Marxism that killed well over 100 million people, as well as eugenics and racial purity. Plato was the ultimate grandfather of both Hitler and Lenin. Ideas matter. If only Chana Cox had lived before those foolish and evil ideas propagated, her ideas could have saved millions of lives, and they could still save countless millions of lives. That is a hell of a legacy. So I hope that more people read what she wrote and her ideas continue to spread, because there are and always will be many things in the world that would be better if they were exposed to my mother's wisdom. My mother taught us kids how to think. She taught us of being unafraid, of being intellectually inferior, of being anyone else. We, after all, were Bernicers. And that meant to her a kind of unique cranial superiority to everyone else on the planet by virtue of being a descendant from her family. It was a sort of fierce Latvish pride, a kind of genetic superiority complex. And while it may have been overstated to some extent, in fact, I kind of hope it is, there is no doubt that all of her surviving children make our way in this world because of our minds, our ability and willingness to truly think differently and do it without any fear whatsoever. When we struggled, she helped, and she was the single most important teacher of my life. I'm not ashamed to admit that my mother basically wrote my college essay. It's no wonder that it worked. And she helped me with paper after paper, critiquing and aiding, and sometimes writing more than a little. She always worried that if she carried me, that I would not learn to walk by myself, and I am pleased that it worked out for the best. Chana Cox taught me how to write, which is to say, she taught me how to think. And she has done it for so many others, from her students to her grandchildren. Calling Nana Chana for advice on a paper was to be exposed to brilliant insight. I'm writing a paper on Aristotle, call Nana Chana. I'm writing a paper on this, call Nana Chana. You call Nana Chana and she would regale you with all the information you needed and probably a little bit more. My mother could learn anything. When the company needed a metallurgist, Chana Cox became a metallurgist. When Lewis and Clark College needed someone to teach political theory or classes in the business school or philosophy or English, Chana Cox could and did. I learned from her that with a liberal arts education and a Berniker mind, anyone could learn and do anything it is possible for a human being to do. Actually, now I know that it's possible without a Berniker mind, but it helps to have the superiority complex. And I saw in the eyes of my father the belief that Chana Cox could be anything, because my father believed that Chana Cox could be anything. She was enabled and encouraged by those around her, a marriage in which she grew and grew. But Chana Cox, despite all that brilliance and books, was also my mother. And as a mother, she possessed a fierce mama bear strength that you could hardly believe. She slept with a double-barrel shotgun under her bed, and nobody doubted that she was happy to use it. This is a woman who would do anything at all to protect her cubs. I never had a moment's hesitation of it. It meant a lot to a kid to have a mother like that, someone who would take on anyone, anytime, anywhere, if it meant defending her own. What a blessing for all of us. Her legacy is found in whom she leaves behind: a husband, 4 loving and creative children, a great many grandchildren, Kanainahara, and the intellectual DNA of which she is so proud, as well as her financial conservatism, which she is proudest of having passed on to Joseph and Nechama, and her oldest children, Geula and Otniel, in turn. In this case, I was always a disappointment. Chana Cox was fiercely proud of each grandchild, protective of all they were, and she did it without judging or taking sides. At some point in my life, I hope to be able to do that too. A hesped for my mother is not complete without understanding just a bit about her complex and deep and incredible marriage with my father. I doubt that two such ill-suited people have ever made a marriage work as well as they have. But they pushed each other and never hesitated to use what the military calls asymmetrical tactics. In other words, they pushed in very different ways because they had very different tools. And for all of her brilliance, my father's force of will would often win out. For example, my father would come back from a business trip. He'd be flying in Friday afternoon, and he'd pick up a few total strangers on the plane and invite them to join us for Shabbos dinner. Woo! He would tell them that it was no problem at all, that his wife would be delighted. Of course, if he had a chance, the airport he would call first. This is before cell phones, so she would get an hour's warning before the guest descended, but often she didn't even get that. And yet, she certainly rose to the challenge. I reckon she put on surprise dinners hundreds of times for all kinds of people. She hated not having warning, but Chana Cox was a Jewish mother, and she loved feeding people. So every time we had surprise guests, she was pretty angry, and she still loved it. Even when the guests were scheduled in advance, we knew we were in for a treat. We kids used to dance around the house, Nechama and me. We have company, company's coming. We'd had so much fun, and my parents would host all these wonderful guests and feed them, and then we'd retire to the living room, where my mother would practice the Yiddish tradition of storytelling. Wonderful, rich, beautiful stories. The fondest memories of my childhood were of my parents telling stories to guests, stories we loved, old and new, stories of Idaho and people they knew and crazy things they saw or did. For my mother and her tradition, stories were a way of making an argument of helping someone see the depth in a certain perspective. I think it's why she wrote fiction and plays, a way of touching people through much more than mere logic. It's a gift she has passed on to Joseph, of whom she was incredibly proud, the purest inheritor of her profound intellectual abilities. Actually, she was fiercely proud of all of her children and grandchildren. She found a way to see the good in so many. Mom's desire to be hospitable was real, however much she hated being ambushed with a dozen guests an hour before Shabbos. And I'm not exaggerating. This happened a lot.
Yeah.
My parents over the years took in countless children, a rolling open foster home for all kids who needed to be somewhere else. This is not an easy thing to do. We had relatives and friends and total strangers come into our home, and my parents would have them stay as long as they or their parents wanted them to stay. It was an incredible investment in the rest of the world. In my childhood, this meant others would come in, out of their own very alien worlds, into our specific environment. We got to meet new people, and sometimes live in fear of them. I had one night with a particular cousin. He was armed with a knife, I was armed with a gun. Nobody died. But I'm not kidding, it was tense.
It was.
Those guests sometimes kept us on our toes, but it also meant that we were participating in mitzvahs, the good deeds of our parents. It was a blessing to see how my parents saw every stray, every lost soul, every hurting kid as an opportunity to invest in someone. I never even saw them hesitate, not a moment. They were flexibly committed to taking anyone who needed a home. She believed in each and every one of these kids. She saw hope in them that nobody else, least of all the kids themselves, did. She saved so very many lives and improved so many others. The Gemara tells us that a person in this world is measured by who they are. But in the world to come, they are known as the parents of their children. In Chana's case, this would include all the other children they loved. That's really something. Just a few years ago, my own daughter Hadassah, at the age of 14, moved to Oregon to be with my parents. She lived with them for 2 whole years, finishing high school before moving on to the nursing program. My daughter gained a second, and in most ways, a primary set of parents in my parents. It was their relationship. And that is more than okay. My parents were the parents to our daughter, and my wife and I are grateful to both of them for that. It was an act of kindness for which there are no words. He who saves a single life is as if they saved the whole world. And being willing, well into your 70s, just a few years before you die, to take in an unhappy 14-year-old? Wow, that's something. I could not be prouder that my daughter had a chance to give back. She's been at the hospital and here tending to my mother as much as she could. Death is not the end, not even in this world. For as long as her intellectual creations and descendants live, Nana Chana lives on and even flourishes. Like great thinkers across time, her spiritual influence waxes even as her physical existence passes away. You can check this on Amazon. Price of river without leaving it has spiked enormously. My mother will be buried next to Jeremiah.
Neil.
His death, in so many ways, defined her life. For years and years, she would come to this cemetery and sleep at Jeremiah's gravesite overnight at his yahrzeit. That loss never lost its edge. I can tell you now that she is so deeply relieved to be with her firstborn again, to finally overcome the distance and the pain that has scarred her for 5 decades. Mom's life was a life well lived, full and rich and deep, a life of giving and love. And now it is time for her to rejoin Jeremiah, to finally heal that wound. May HaKadosh Baruch Hu bless her and all whom she loved. May her neshama have an aliyah to rejoin those loved ones she lost in this world. And may her memory on this earth be a blessing.
Chana Cox. I do not know much about her. I am one of her grandchildren, and I did not show much interest in the lives of my grandparents. In fact, arguably my favorite grandparent is Moshe, my mother's father, but she was an important figure in my life nonetheless. For 6 weeks, I was up at Bossman's house. Prior to those 6 weeks, I was a brat. I was spoiled, I screamed, I cried. I was such a terrifying mess that I managed to scare away a former Marine/Army drill sergeant. Within the first week of me being up there, Chana broke a plate with her bare hands, saying that Bossman's biker friends did not break her, and I'm not going to do it either. I only read the first chapter of A River Ran Out of Eden, and that's the only book I've ever read, and only one chapter, and I regret not reading more of it. I regret not talking to her about it. I regret not seeing what she thought about writing the book, and I'm not going to be able to ask her about it anymore.
We're doing some edits here.
Yes, Hannah brother Eli.
Her favorite brother.
Her favorite brother, yes.
This thing gets too loud. I have a very loud voice. I heard half a picture here.
I'm sorry, we're not going to say anything negative about her at her service.
I'm not going to say anything negative about her at all. You heard half a picture here. You heard about this Berniker thing. And there was nothing wrong with what you said, and it was reasonably accurate. Seriously. But do you think that old Berniker would have invited people to Sabbath anytime?
No.
You think old Berniker would worry about every kind of child here, there, or anywhere else? My father was a difficult man. The other half was her mother. Where did you get the idea that Nellie was a peasant? Nellie was the person who took in everybody. Joseph Benjamin tells me the story about how Chana nurtured him in learning and wouldn't give up on him. It's the mirror image
what Nellie did with Nina. Nina was born after a very difficult and troubled pregnancy. The doctors didn't believe she was going to survive. They called up that old Russian doctor we had in the family and said, "You've lost the child, you're about to lose the mother." Nina apparently had some sort of oxygen deprivation, but she survived. She's still alive in Israel. But they said she would never be able to read or write or type or all kinds of things. The mother wouldn't give it up. Nina learned to read. Nina even learned to type. Whatever they said wasn't possible, Nellie made sure it was possible. This is the mirror image of her mother. So many things that you have described about Chana didn't come from the old man. No, seriously.
You say the same about us.
No, seriously.
We know.
Okay, I'm going to tell you my story about the old man.
No, Chana. Let's talk
We're
about
talking about
Chana.
Chana's the focus.
Tell us about
Chana is the
Chana.
focus.
Right?
Tell us a story about Chana.
Good. Okay, no sense complaining about the old man. No, but seriously, Chana, and I learned this more than I'd ever thought before from Benjamin. When he sent me an email about my family, and I said, I couldn't recognize a bunch of things. We won't go there. But when he told me his own story, it's my mother. And it's funny because she struggled all of her life. Chana struggled all of her life to prove to everybody somehow or another that she was the good one and that she was like my mother, and it didn't need any proof. And somehow that was some burden she had. So the richness of which you are all speaking isn't just this Berniker stuff. Believe me, it isn't. It's that heart and soul that came out of that other side of the family. And I had to get up here and say it because in so many ways that was a struggle. And now it's a blessing. And all of you have been blessed very much by having that part of her. And I just have to say that here. Thank you.
Thank you. Cool. Gula?
Gula,
Gula, please.
Anything else?
The more the merrier.
What? Within
Not
limits.
scheduled, but I didn't plan this. Okay, so when I think of my grandmother, there's probably one thing that I think of, and that's her dedication to education and information. So, I would always talk to her about random things. I think honestly my love for random information came from her. For example, I once had a 1-hour discussion on her on the Detroit Purple Gang and how they would operate. But I think one of the most interesting points was about 3 months ago, back when my high school, Benson, was having some problems with PPS. And I explained the situation, kind of ranting about it over Thanksgiving, and she immediately got angry about the high school being gutted. And she was talking about how PPS was making a mistake and such and that. And I was impressed. I was impressed by how she could be so compassionate to a high school that's in the center of Portland, people she never met, and how much she could care about a group of kids. And honestly, I think that inspired me to be
a person who cares about people, a person who's a bit of a nitpicker, and honestly, a lot of my personality comes from her.
Thank you.
I'm going to end at that.
Back on track.
Hi. I have a short letter, don't worry, very short, from my brother in Israel who is just finishing the army, so is not able to.
Not finishing army, finishing basic
Finishing
training.
basic training.
Basic training. Survived basic training.
Survived basic training.
Providing
hasn't,
the women of
antagonized
basic
his
training.
commanders yet. Okay. Good morning to you all. Normally, I'd ask how all of you are doing as well, but I think I already know. If you were to ask me how I'm doing, I'd say, as I just did while writing this, Alhamdulillah, which is sort of an Arabic version of Baruch Hashem. Normally, I say this in a jovial, semi-sarcastic way. Today, a little more seriously. Unfortunately, as you're all probably aware, my grandmother is recently deceased. I expect this to be a real setback in her life, as well as her career. As well as her writing career, perhaps one she won't overcome. Though there are several stories of other Jews in my area overcoming such setbacks in life. In short, I'd say this is a rather sad turn of events. I never thought she wanted nor needed a ghostwriter. On a more serious note, I believe she accomplished many things that she set out to do in her life. Of course, she had a couple more, but that's to be expected. She would probably be happier had I learned grammar. She taught me as best she could, and I'd like to say I learned something, but I think I just like to say things. My grandmother was a member of the intelligentsia. She didn't just like to say things, she chose what she said carefully, and she wrote it down and published it.
Thus, books on Amazon.
Of course, she was still a warm, loving lady. She had the Jewish instinct for feeding people, as you've heard, despite any signs that they were or were not hungry. And despite being more at home in her office, perhaps, at the lectern, than in most parts of her house or office. She was always more concerned about the guns getting cleaned than the fact we cleaned them on the dining room table. Joseph mentioned she was a Renaissance woman, and I think she did a really great job of straddling the worlds of the Boondocks and the Academy. While she never quite got me interested in a doctorate, I was fully prepared for my encounters with the real old-school Russian Muscovits I've been meeting. I understand them. They come from the world of my grandmother. They don't need to explain where they grew up. Unlike all the Ukrainians I've been meeting, I already know that. Thanks, Nana Khana, for all the mac and cheese, for all the pierogies, for getting me into college, helping write his college essay, for telling me to just finish and not to get too worried about the small stuff, for talking to me about Machiavelli and Cicero, and then reminding me that they're not really philosophers because they're from Italy. And of course, thanks for marrying Boss Man. Boss Man isn't so easy. I've been telling people I'm 1/16th Apache, and apparently it's bad for Shidduchim. Of course, it probably would help if I stopped dating Comanches and Navajo. If all these intentional grammatical errors don't get her attention, I'm not sure what else will. Thank you, Google, for reading this.
Thank you.
Me and Neil's concurrent insights did not come from her.
Tamara,
Yeah, it did.
and that's already spoke, right?
Yeah.
That's already spoke. They already spoke. Okay, so Loretta, you want to speak on behalf of Losing Clark? We're almost through with this.
Yeah, we're almost through, but I could talk all day.
Please don't.
But I'll try to cover a few things that haven't come up. I met Chana in 1980 when my husband and I came out to Portland with our PhDs from Columbia. And who knows? Rodney and Chana had one too, and I've heard the stories, and right?
Yeah.
Yeah. But anyway, we didn't know each other at Columbia. We got to know each other at Lewis and Clark College. And I'm going to shift between then and now, I have to point out, if you don't mind, there are a lot more things that she's written and published that are in here, right?
There are more
You
things.
know, many more. And so that will kind of get me into the last month of Hannah's life, that I think I will tell you a little bit about. We used to meet at the JCC for lunch. We needed it. We were colleagues at the college, but we were girlfriends. And I'll cut to my joke line. It was the last lunch I had with Chana was in December, and then she says, of course, what girls do, we talk about our husbands. And I happen to know a lot of things about boss man that nobody wants me to know.
Very nice.
And certainly not repeat.
No, I promise. But Chana said, but Loretta, your husband is normal. I said, no, he's not. God bless you, Ronnie. I didn't come up to say what a good girlfriend I was, but in truth, I read almost everything she's written, and there's some really, really incredible, very important work there. I did proofreading for her, and so I know her style. And then in December, it was about December 15th, she had brought a book from my husband. He also wrote about Plato, and she wrote about Plato, but indeed they were supposed to be on different sides of that argument. And Curtis was cleaning out his books and going through and found Chana's book, and he opened it up and said, this is beautiful. It is really beautifully written, and it is. So my daughter had just published a book. Am I too loud? No,
it's okay.
Just about like 3 more minutes.
Go for it.
Oh, good. My daughter had just published a book called Many Love. It's about polyamory. And that, for all of you who may not have practiced it, is basically anything goes. I'm in the book because I'm her mother. And talk about anger, I got it. And let's put it this way, she and I were very close, Italian, Catholic. Well, what's she thinking, but we had a lot in common. And she read the piece, the part about me and how I raised my daughter, and she got angry. And I said, it's just Sophie, she's fine, it's no big deal. She still got angry, she wouldn't let it go. I have the anger thing, and I pushed the table at MJCC, and everybody looked, and I stood up and I said, I'm leaving. And so she said, well, do you want me to sign this book? And I said, no, I'll get it next week. So that meant we were having lunch again, but I wasn't talking anymore. And that day, we had a great lunch. She signed, she introduced the book, or she signed it in pencil. I said, do you think Curtis will mind pencil? No, he won't mind, no big deal. We have the book, but that was Wednesday, and then on Saturday I got an email saying, I have leukemia. And the next week, I met Hadassah, whom I know so much about, and have so much, so that was the last time that I saw her. She was good, she was just beautiful. She was in good mood. She wanted me to read to her. We yacked it up, but it was still, she was fine. She told me how it was going to go, and she said, I just want to die with dignity, is what she said. And I think boss man, that she wanted to go before you did. It's just the way it was. And anyway, so I said, okay, I'll be back. And it was kind of good. I'll go on Saturdays because you guys were all at home for some reason. And I went the second time, and she wasn't doing as well, but she's just as beautiful as ever. And I was able to ask her how were your dreams? And she said, they're very good. Are they good dreams? Yes. And I said, how do you feel? Fine. Then a week later, she wasn't doing as well. And then another would just talk, it went really it wasn't long. The last time I saw her, she was speaking in her native language. I didn't know that she spoke Yiddish. I held her, I touched her. Does this hurt? No. She was okay. But she fought to stay alive. But she suffered to stay alive. Right, ladies, girls, you were there.
I don't even know what language it was. It really wasn't Yiddish. It was something
I'm
else.
still gonna Google it because I
Google
remember
it and find out. Let's figure it out.
Yeah, no, because I remember some of the words and I still haven't looked it up. But anyway, I love her.
Thank you. We're just going to have a few words from Yosef Yaffe, who actually never met my mother, but he's read everything she wrote of a academic nature, and in the strangest of things, he's your chassid.
Yes.
Singular.
I think I better explain why I'm here. My father became rabbi in Torah in Springfield, and Nechama brought one of her books over to my house, and I was home for a bit, and I opened the book, and I said, "Oh, this is interesting," and I read the whole thing. I said, then there were more papers lying around the shul, and I read those, and then Nechama connected me with her mother, and I emailed back and forth a few times, answered some questions, and then she said, "Oh, I have a son, Joseph, who writes something on the parish every week." And then they asked if I'd come. I said, "Sure," and I came, and I met the rest of her family, at least everyone who's here so far, and apparently many grandchildren are here. Before that, there was only O'Neill that I talked to. It was really fun.
Yes.
We met, and then we stayed in the sukkah all night till like 1 a.m. talking about Mustangs and Thunderbolts and other airplanes. So when I read Reflection, so obviously I'm a Chabadnik, and if you know anything about Chabad history, we hate communists. And we hate a lot of the associated with them. So the first book, Reflections, that I read, it wasn't just how something goes wrong, it was why it's inherently wrong. It was like, oh, okay, that's why it works.
Yeah.
And it was just opened the whole new field in front of me. Then she writes about the difference between what she calls a Noahide covenant and a Sinaitic covenant. First of all, it tells me why America starts off the way it is, and it tells me why Judaism works the way it is. And that question has bothered me for a while because there's this tension between the two. That was another long-standing question that I had. It's like, okay, they're arranged differently, and there's good reason for that because they are different, and they're both necessary. And then there was then there was the plays, and the plays really got to me because Pharaoh, King of Egypt, really made it come alive. I remember I forgot it was her or her daughter that they wrote to me like, "I'm not sure if you're gonna like this because it's not orthodox enough." Maybe I said no. It was first of all it was. Second of all, it made it come alive. It was exactly what the other side would be saying and how they would argue it. And it was like Torah isn't just telling you what happened; it's telling you how to look at those events, and you could easily look at it a different way. And it's telling us what's right. And then the oath, about just if anybody doesn't know what it is, the oath is about the confrontation between Harold the Saxon and William the Conqueror. And I never thought a play can move me to tears. I didn't think anything could move me to tears for that matter. No, just a play, and it was nice. And I love history, but this wasn't just history. It was real people that happened. Obviously, we don't know what they actually said and thought, but this is, and of course, there's the disgustingly obvious Anglo-Saxon bias, and I love it. And really, everything that everyone said until now is that is what I've been studying since high school about the core concept of of Chabad Hasidus is that there's intellect and there's things you learn, and it has to become part of your life. You have to feel it emotionally, not just know it. And that she really did. And then I met her children, and then they were trying to show me what they wrote and show me their books, and it's like it just continues. And this is that the living should take to heart that it does not end with a person's passing. Certainly because a person's life is not just the physical life, it's the life of what we think and what we do, and the thoughts certainly continue, and our children continue what they're doing, and it's amazing to see that they just more, and it spins off, it continues, and it's just that God doesn't end. Well, we'll finish everything, I don't know. I never actually met her, but I was in. I did pray Shabbos the night before she passed, and it was. Yeah, it was real. It wasn't just a book. It was the book comes. It was.
Good, thank you. Thank you.
We're into Act 3. El Mali Rachamim Shoichen Bamramim Hametzei Menucha Nevoino Memalais Kirashim Utairim Kizahir Rakia Mazhirim As Nishmas Anabas Abraham Shel Kali Lama Vavor Shnadot Tzedakarian Haskara Nishmaso Meganeiden Tehei Menuchasa Lachem Mahala Rachamim Yasnireu Neseseg Napav Li'olamim Yitzrar, Yitzrar, HaChaim es nishmaso, Adonai Nagalaso, Nesanuach Mishgaro,